Aurora, Texas, 1897, 50 years before Roswell. Newspapers reported a major crash and a dead spaceman buried in the Aurora cemetery. But as time went by, the story was lost. Then, 70 years later, it resurfaced.
Well, in 1973, Bill Case started writing articles for the Dallas Morning News, and that spread over the countryside. The interest jumped because, again, somebody was resurrecting the old Aurora crash in 1897.
The legend was reborn. Ufologists across the country scrambled to uncover the truth behind the possible alien graveyard. Hayden Hughes, the founder of the International UFO Bureau, was among the first to arrive in Aurora.
Aurora was the outstanding case to me because of the crash of one of the airships for study, and for the remains of a pilot to be studied or exhumed if he was buried.
Aurora was different. There was a body, a supposed alien body.
There's very few retrievable corpses or bodies associated with UFOs, but none that can be documented as well as the Aurora case. My belief in what the occupant pilot was what it was said, that it was the pilot of what the craft was. His description was that it was an alien in form.
It was small in stature, which would confirm the type of creatures that are seen most frequently aboard UFOs. They are small in stature, childlike in size.
The body, the crash site, the remnants of the airship. To Hughes, these had to be either the real thing or a hoax, and it was worth investigating.
As to what to expect when we came to Aurora that first time, I was quite surprised that it wasn't as big as I visualized it to be. Coming into town, where was it? Well, we just went through it. There's the cemetery, okay? There's the hill, the windmills over this way. There's some houses down this way, or businesses. That was the extent of it.
Another surprise, Hughes's reception by the residents of Aurora. It appeared that they had no interest in solving the mystery.
One time you talked, the people were open. The next time, they were not. We were allowed in the cemetery on some occasions. On some occasions, we were barred and could not go in the cemetery. So the emotional level of the town kind of told me they wanted no involvement with it. I had gone from extreme excitement and the possibility of what we could get to a frustration in that it was like the town was against us from the beginning.
Then Hughes and other UFO researchers in Aurora had a breakthrough, the discovery of first-hand accounts of the crash. The witnesses were less than perfect. Some memories had faded, others were incomplete, and eyewitnesses were now in their 80s. Ufologist Jim Mars was among the first to interview the residents.
In 1973, I interviewed 3 people who were alive at the time. One, Robbie Hansen, said it was a hoax, but then by her own story, she was not a direct witness, had no direct knowledge of it. Her father was told about it, he laughed, thought it was a hoax, and that stuck in her mind.
But then, Mars discovered 2 witnesses who contradicted Hansen and offered first-hand accounts of the actual crash.
There's Mary Evans, who did recall that something crashed. Her parents went to look at the wreckage, but would not let her go. So we have kind of an indirect witness there who says it did happen. And then we've got Charlie Stevens, who is a 10-year-old boy, was out doing the chores and actually told me he saw the thing go over. He said it was trailing smoke and it seemed to be in trouble. He saw it disappear towards Aurora, heard the explosion, saw smoke going up. He wanted to go up and see what had happened, but his father, this old farmer in 1897, said, "No, son, we have to finish the chores." And he said his father went up into town the next day and came back and told him about all the wreckage that was lying around. So the preponderance of the eyewitness testimony leans towards something happened.
In addition to eyewitness accounts, researchers located one man who added a new twist to the investigation. Aurora resident Brawley Oates, who suffered from an extreme case of rheumatoid arthritis, believed his debilitating health condition was somehow connected to the Aurora legend.
Brawley Oates lived at the site of the crash. I believe he moved there in 1945. And when he moved there, he had the well cleaned out because it had all this metal stuff and debris down in it. And he needed to use it for water. Oates believes that the water in that well that he and his family drank for about 12 years affected their health drastically. In fact, he developed some of the worst arthritis conditions in his hands and other things that anybody has seen.
I don't see how a person could survive or could walk or could function in any way. And basically it was, they would either swell up so big that they would burst. And at times probably bigger than golf balls on your fingers. And he claimed that it was from maybe the water from the well that they used. That's the way he told it.
Brawley Oates told me that it was because of radiation from the well where people had thrown pieces of this Aurora spaceship.
But in sealing off the well on his property, Oates also sealed crucial evidence to the mystery inside. For researchers, the scientific evidence to support their case was becoming increasingly difficult to find.
We can't go on legends. We need scientific proof that you could take any court of law and prove that this event actually took place, as our investigation disclosed.
In 1973, investigators set out to the crash site and the graveyard. They hoped to find any evidence that could have survived the 75 years since the crash. In the 1973 investigation, researchers found witnesses that authenticated an airship crash in April 1897. There were also claims of an alien buried in the local cemetery. But even with personal testimonies, ufologists realized that they needed scientific evidence. They hoped to find debris from the crash on the property formerly owned by Judge J.S. Proctor.
What happened to the metal is probably anyone's guess at this point. The best guess to me was the main bulk of it was hauled off, and what was left behind was thrown down the well.
Finding the well was easy, but researchers quickly discovered a problem. The well had been sealed off years earlier by the new property owner, Brawley Oates.
He had this big slab, 8 by 8 feet concrete over the old well. So to move that would be a major job.
Discouraged, investigators turned their search for clues to other parts of the property.
They went around and they got the little pinging of the machine, and they dig down and they find pieces of stuff. And some of the things they found were natural things you would find on a piece of property that had been around for years and had been farmed.
Nails, bolts, and many other identifiable items were dug up at the crash site. But then, something caught their attention.
One of the fellows from Corpus Christi, Texas, found a piece that was very significant that MUFON has actually had analyzed by John Schuessler.
This was tested 2 times. In 1973, immediately after it was taken out of the ground, it was transmitted to me, and I took it into an aerospace laboratory. This laboratory was one that was used to determine the failure modes of aircraft and spacecraft parts. So they had the latest and best equipment. They're the ones that did the first analysis and determined the unusual nature of it. The analysis showed it had been there for a long, long time. And then when you cut into the metal, they were 95% pure aluminum and 5% iron. 5% iron in solution in aluminum is a no-no. It doesn't mix that way. It's like less than 1% normally. And when there is iron, there's usually zinc or other materials. There was none of that in this case.
Although the major aerospace laboratory that initially tested the sample has asked to remain anonymous for this program, Schuessler verified the results with Anastas Laboratories in Houston, Texas. According to Schuessler, both laboratories reached the same conclusion. Intrigued, he had the laboratories continue their tests on the sample to further determine the object's origin.
The stories were that this thing exploded. It blew molten material out of this vast explosion mess, and that material hit things and dried and cooled. Well, the structural analysis of the material showed that it was air-cooled on the ground after it had been molten in the air. So the structure was perfect to fit the story.
Has Schuessler uncovered the smoking gun to the Aurora crash?
The material found and analyzed in 1973 couldn't have been made at that time on that farm or in the town of Aurora or anywhere around there, but it had to have been made in a very sophisticated laboratory using ultra-pure refining techniques. It's just a marvelous thing to have a piece of something you believe really could have come from a spaceship.